We have made it.
I'm ready to talk and discuss.
I know. Well, y'all, welcome back to part 6, the final episode, no exit of the Monroe Files. In case you didn't know, over the last 5 weeks, we've kind of been throwing it all over the place. We have been going in depth into the life and death of Marilyn Monroe. We did the original podcast episode back on 8/2. And then I decided, I was like, you know what? I need to go further in this. So, welcome to the special edition of Everything Vaguely Paranormal. I am Blake Smith, and my partner in crime over here is Shelly Pruitt, my wonderful special guest throughout this whole thing. Thank you so much for sticking it out with me.
I'm just finally glad I'm going to get to talk about it tonight. I've been
It's
holding my tongue. Oh
been
my God.
eating you alive.
I know, because we'll get on the phone after the sober. I go, when can I talk? When can I throw this theory out? And you're like, not yet.
Not quite yet. Give us another
Yeah.
2 weeks. Yeah, so
Yeah.
Shelly has been biting her tongue this whole time. So Shelly gets to speak freely tonight. Yay.
Everybody beware.
I know. So tonight, what we're going to do is we are going to form the discussion and the conclusion of the previous 5 weeks. I hope you've been keeping up with the last 5 episodes. If not, you can always feel free after this one ends. Don't jump off yet, but after this one ends, you can always go catch up and then rewatch this one again. So
now, if you want to participate in the discussion, you do not have to have watched all of these,
No.
all of the previous ones. Type it in the comments. If and trust me, Blake is the expert on Miss Marilyn Monroe, and so if you are unclear about something, pop it in the comments, and
Absolutely.
he will answer you. If you have a theory, because y'all may come up with one that we hadn't thought of, it's going to be tough, but you might do it.
This is definitely audience participation if you feel
Yes.
like you want to participate. So, with that being said, let's not waste any time because we've been waiting 5 weeks already. Let's
I
get to
know.
discussing.
Yay.
So, look, I'm just going to jump out and I'm going to say my conclusion right off the bat. After talking about the last 5 weeks, going through the relationship with the Kennedy brothers, the lost weekend, the 2-week investigation, the inconsistencies in the timeline, and the thoughts and everything that was happening in Marilyn's life. My theory, after all this research as well over the past 4 months, is that I do not believe that Marilyn took her own life accidentally or on purpose. I think that it was. I think that she was. I don't know if I necessarily want to say that she was murdered, because I don't think I can classify it as an actual murder. Or
this is a discussion, Blake. Throw your
Hold
theory
on.
out there and
I
commit
am.
to it.
I'm getting there. But I don't think I can label it as a straight out murder because it's still unclear to me of where it could have possibly been a straight on murder, a negligent death, or an accidental manslaughter. That's my theory. I haven't come to that conclusion yet, but I will argue the fact that she did not take her own life. That was not her doing. And the biggest thing that to me is what speaks to that is the autopsy itself. The autopsy itself does not make sense to me. It does not add up. The amount of drugs that were in Marilyn's system equates to the fact that she would have had to taken anywhere between, I believe it was like 47 and 85 pills. And you don't do that accidentally. The other things that don't make sense to me on that fact with the pills is, number one, there was no undissolved pills left in her stomach. There was no residue. There was no discoloration. She left supposedly 10 chloral hydrate pills in a bottle. And I'm sorry to say, but if you are going to attempt to take your own life, why are you leaving 10 pills?
Why are you? Yeah. If your goal is to end it all, why would you leave something untaken?
No.
Let me throw something in here. Now we kind of got discussed this on the phone, and let's just kind of talk about Marilyn for a hot second. Marilyn Monroe, I'm in agreement with you that I don't think there's any way that she intentionally took her own life. And let's kind of put it in that Marilyn Monroe was too big to fail. Okay.
It's very true.
And she had a new contract coming up. She was about to get to do this tell-all. And something I found very interesting about her when we were talking about her previous, when she was growing up, her past, something that she had always been from the time she was a tiny child was someone's problem.
Mm-hmm.
From the time she was this big to when she's a mega famous superstar, even then she was someone's problem, the Marilyn problem
Mm-hmm.
that had to be solved. She had to be handled. She had to be, just as she was shuffled around in her young life, she was shuffled around to beds, to men, to husbands, to studios, to people in her life being shuffled in and out.
Some
She
of
had to
it at
be
her own
handled.
choosing, though. Some at her own choosing, because let's not lie here. Marilyn was a brilliant actress. Marilyn had talent. She had sexuality. We know that, but Marilyn also made very crafty choices in the men that she was seen
Oh,
with.
I am not saying that she was dumb on this, and I'm not saying that she didn't choose this, but she did, for a lack of a better word, threw the cards in the air, see where they landed, then picked out the best cards.
It's a good analogy to put it.
And I don't think in any way, shape, or form that most of that was uncalculated.
Mm-hmm.
I think she chose very powerful men and people in her
Mm-hmm.
life for a reason, and that was to advance her career.
Oh, absolutely. Without a
Long
doubt.
and the short of it. So, in order for her to have thought that hard and that long, and to have been that calculated, I don't think there's any way that she decided my work here is done.
Right.
I
And see,
it's just it's too convenient to
right.
solve the Maryland problem.
I agree. My whole thing about it is that when I was doing this research, we say this a lot on the podcast. Part of being a good researcher and a good investigator is you can't just look at the biased opinion of what you believe. You have to look at the other side as well. Well, it was hard for me to walk down the road that this woman took her own life. I just don't believe it. It doesn't hold up in my brain, doesn't hold up in my heart or in my gut. And excuse me. I just totally derailed my train of thought, but it'll come back to me in a second.
It doesn't hold up in your heart or your brain that this woman took her own life because
yeah,
in doing the research on both sides,
that's right. And doing the
whenever you're doing
research
research on both sides,
when you're doing the research on both sides and all that stuff, the part that kills me is those that say, yes, it was an accidental overdose, or yes, it was a purposeful overdose. They argue such minute little details. But the issue that I found along the way with the research, like for instance, it's kind of like she couldn't have made all these phone calls because the names weren't written down and typed out and put into her phone books records, by secretary or something like that. Well, that doesn't matter. You have like 4 numbers to remember back then,
well, and let me tell you this: before cell phones, and yes, I'm old enough to have lived before cell phones, people. You had everybody you called often; their number was memorized. You didn't have to look that up. Da 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 da. And so that, yeah, throw that out the window. People she called often, she wouldn't have needed her book for that.
Yeah. But what I don't see is the fact that these people are trying to harp on those tiny little details when in fact nobody has said anything about what Eunice Murray, the housekeeper, said in the years since. Nobody has said anything about the letters that Ralph Greenson, her psychiatrist, has sent to people since her death. Pat Newcomb, the things that it just came out just as recently as 2018. Nobody is negating any of these moments. What they're harping on and what they're focusing on is the fact that she couldn't make phone calls because the numbers weren't written down and typed out in her phone books. To me, it's kind of like to be able to definitively say that this woman took her own life and ended her own career on her own terms by her own hand. You have to literally discredit every single statement by every key eyewitness or key player in this story over the last 60 years. If you cannot do that, then you cannot 100% say that it was by her own hand that she took her own life.
I don't disagree with you.
And Holly, thank you for the comment saying she wouldn't have done it without putting everything out there first.
And thank you, Holly. That is exactly what we mean about the Marilyn problem.
Mm-hmm.
Remember, just before she passed away, let's just put it like that. She was ready to give a very in-depth, very dangerous expose about
Hmm.
everything she knew, and she was ready to talk about everybody she knew. She's an amazing woman, but a vindictive bitch. She did not play. And okay, she was a problem. The Maryland problem, as Hoover and the Kennedys had discussed, there was a Maryland problem, just as she had been from the day that she arrived on this planet. And she just was like the hell with them. How convenient that before she is supposed to meet and give this scathing expose, she's conveniently found
Two
deceased.
days. 2 days. She was allegedly going to do it on Monday, August the 6th of 1962. She is found dead on August the 5th, 1962. So she's found the day before.
We all know
Uh,
she was actually found dead on August the 4th, though.
yeah, she was. And that's the thing is like what gets me is that even the timeline doesn't make sense to me. And this is something that I really went in depth in the previous
And the
stuff.
timeline is what the main problem is with me as well.
And it goes to the fact that it's like, how can you have someone say that she passed away at let's say, the 3:30 time frame. Let's go ahead and move the timeline, the 3 hours that they did the same night that she was found. It's at 3:30 that they say that she passes away, or she's pronounced dead at 3:50 at the latest. It doesn't make sense to me. The other thing that doesn't add up is when you have the mortuary attendant who's coming to pick her up. He basically says she was a little bit stiff. She was hard to kind of lay out on the gurney and all that stuff. It took us about 5 minutes to do so. I would have placed her death anywhere between 6 to 8 hours prior to, which would have put her in between the 9:30 to 11:30 time frame. When you have Natalie Jacobs, the wife of the studio press agent, who is at the Henry Mancini concert. I keep mispronouncing that. My
That's
bad.
okay. Henry Mancini. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And being told that her husband is being drawn away from the concert that we know had to end by 11 o'clock due to laws in the area.
Yeah,
to
noise laws. Yeah.
to take a phone call because something was terribly wrong at Marilyn's house. And Natalie Jacobs says, the last thing I remember is that we were at the concert and then we weren't at the concert. And she says that she got taken to her house and her husband went over to Marilyn's house. And that they're saying that nobody else was there except for the housekeeper whenever she was discovered, which could not have been true because Natalie Jacobs is absolutely adamant that her husband was there the entire time. And she says, I don't know why he chose to withhold what he chose, but you have to remember that his job was a publicist. His job was to keep everybody at abeyance. It was to keep the things under the rug, sweep them under the rug. Um, that's
He
the
was a
biggest thing to
fixer.
me.
He
Well,
was a fixer. Mm-hmm.
that's the biggest problem with me with the timeline is the fact that science doesn't lie. Rigor mortis, liver mortis, algor mortis, none of that lies. That is the body telling the story about when and how it passed. And you get onto this thing of this dual lividity where it's on her back and then on her face based on liver mortis where the blood is pooling, which is indicating that she was on her back
She
for a
was
short amount
moved.
of time. Yes, and then placed on her face. That her body would have been moved in order for dual lividity to take place. I mean, that's all science, you know. I mean, yes, it was 1962. Probably all of this was, kind of somewhat in its infancy still. Knowing what we know now, with the information that we have now and the research that we've done now, I don't see how anybody can look at this and think anything else, especially when you have specimens from her autopsy disappearing.
A lot of things disappeared that concern her.
Yeah.
And of course, you know me and my conspiracy theories. I love a good conspiracy theory. And this one has teeth and traction. And with the fact that things disappeared about her, could it have been, let's play devil's advocate, could it have been the reason some of the things disappeared? They were souvenir seekers. There's always people who want to take a piece and say, I have a piece of this, and it's a celebrity's. Could it have been done at the instruction of someone else? Absolutely. Could it have been removed by someone higher in power than whoever was in control of them? Absolutely. It's probably a combination of all three.
Mm-hmm.
Based on the ability, because first of all, you don't get into a locked door unless you have a key or you're
Mhm.
willing to break it down and put it back up. Okay. And these people that would have been taking things, breaking down the door and leaving a trace that they had been there, probably not likely. It would have been someone with a
Mhm.
key that could have gotten in and gotten out
Oh,
under whoever's
100%.
instruction. It does not
100%.
matter.
I will argue the fact that I don't think it was all three. I don't think that you have people in this instance that would be a souvenir keeper, so to speak, of these specimens or anything like that had to do with her autopsy, because we're talking about stomach, the duodenum, the colon, small intestine,
You
kidneys.
say
These
that,
are the
but
stuff.
JFK's slice of JFK's brain and JFK's brain are missing. Pieces of let's see, who's John Wayne Gacy's brain have gone missing from medical labs. Souvenir
I,
seekers.
I'm not saying that it's not a possibility, but when you couple that with the missing phone records, you know, the fact that they were available between the hours of about 4 to 6 a.m. the morning that she is found, and then after 6 a.m., they're never to be seen again. You have missing phone records, you have missing specimens. The autopsy report is not 100% complete, neither is the toxicology report. You have these missing documents. I don't think in this instance, could they have taken them and taken them home, put them in a freezer or whatever, and kept them for all of eternity? Probably, but somebody was like, make them disappear. And Thomas Noguchi,
And
the guy who
suddenly that
did
son of a
the
bitch became a
autopsy,
magician. Poof, be gone.
well, but the guy who did the autopsy, when he went back and he was like, I need the tests that were ran on the samples, and he's like, oh, they were accidentally discarded.
Yeah, that didn't happen. There was no
Yeah,
accidentally. They were probably discarded, but it
there
was not
was
an accident.
there was a forensic pathologist, and he had been a part of many, like I think it's like 20 or 30,000 autopsies throughout his career.
Are
Cecil
you talking
Reich.
about? Oh, okay.
Cecil Reich.
Okay.
He was also I believe it
Cecil
was like the
Recht. W
Recht.
R E
That's
C
it.
T
That's it.
H.
I knew it was something along that lines.
I was going, okay, it could have been Baden, it could have been Cecil. There was one more, the little guy from, I don't remember if he's from, I think he's from China. That dude
Mhm.
that's the blood spatter expert. Yeah, I like him too.
Oh,
That
I know
dude's
who you're talking about.
smart.
Yeah. But he has even commented on Marilyn's case. And the fact is he says out of all the time that he has been a part of these autopsies or doing forensic pathology, he has never heard of somebody's specimen, especially to the level of Marilyn Monroe's celebrity, disappearing. The other issue that he had was the fact that um, suicide was the check mark, and I'm using the term. Yes, I'm trying to not be as triggering with that, but that was the term that was used, that was marked on the
Probable
death certificate.
suicide
Well,
was
hold on,
marked.
I'm getting there. No, suicide was marked with a question mark next to it, and the word probable was written in.
Yeah.
And Cecil's issue with this was there is a box that is labeled as undetermined. And there is nothing wrong as an autopsy expert or a forensic pathologist or whatever, that mortician, whatever you want to label them as, of checking that undetermined box. There's
That's
nothing
right.
wrong with that. And that's his words exactly. But what happens with that is that then the case would have to have been looked into.
Investigated.
It would have had to have a formal investigation. They would have had to call witnesses, gotten a grand jury. They would have had to testify under oath. And oh my God, we can't have this because of the close links to JFK and RFK, among other people. We're not even talking about just them two, the mob, throw anybody else in there that you want to. And they just, to me, they weren't going to have that. So I think that that's why suicide with probable written outside and a question mark was put on her death certificate, and that the coroner's assistant was forced to sign the death certificate so that they could release that. I mean, we're talking about a bullshit 2-week investigation where all they did was hold about 8 fucking
look at me press conferences.
Yeah, look at me press conference. This is what we're doing. Oh, this is what we're doing. Da, 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 da. And then they step forward and go, well, we've interviewed everybody that we possibly can. No, you haven't. You interviewed Dr. Ralph Greenson, her psychiatrist, which, yes, probably knew the ins and outs of her brain at that time if you're trying to go down the route of claiming it as her taking her own life. You did not interview Pat Newcomb, Eunice Murray, Norman Jeffries. We're talking publicist, housekeeper, and handyman at her house, the ones who were around her all the time. None of her ex-husbands or former husbands were interviewed. None of her close friends were interviewed. The only interview they did in 15 days was Dr. Ralph Greenson. And they stepped forward and said, well, she's basically a wacko. Is that she's this damsel in distress that tried to make some last ditch effort to gain attention and reach for the phone and didn't make it in time. And it's just utter bullshit. Because there's memorandums that are being filed at the courthouse by John Miner, who's the district deputy attorney at the time, who was present at the autopsy, basically saying, look, I listened to a tape that Dr. Ralph Greenson played me, and after hearing it, I don't believe that she took her own life anymore. But yet, is that anywhere to be found? Nope. There's very little police records and stuff like that. Phone records still ain't been seen in 60 years. Very few police records. The autopsy is half there. Toxicology reports half there. Phone records gone. So I don't see how anybody can look at this with everything that she had coming up, as you just stated earlier, with our contract, new movie, this $1 million deal between two movies, and be like, yep, she just decided that she was done. Sorry, I'll get off my soapbox for just a second. I've been holding in for 5 weeks like you have because this shit just pisses me off. Marilyn is my girl. Love me some Marilyn Monroe.
That's okay. So you say you don't believe that it was a suicide. You believe that someone had a hand in her death. Who is your villain?
For me, it's going to come into the fact of the statements that were made from eyewitnesses when the paramedics and the doctors arrived. If I had to, I don't really want to say pin it on somebody, but if I had
Who is your villain in this story?
Theoretically, if I had to pin it on somebody, it would fall down to Dr. Ralph Greenson. Because I think that between him, and I'm sorry, but I think Dr. Engelberg would have to go down too, because between the two men here that are prescribing her so much freaking Nimbutal, she was prescribed 3 times the normal dosage that people take. I mean, my God, the woman drank and ate pills like candy. I think what ended up happening was she had this distressing moment. If you go back and listen to the previous episode, she had this distressing moment, allegedly, with Robert Kennedy. The day that she dies, Robert Kennedy is supposedly at
allegedly
her house.
hours before she dies.
Yeah. So she gets upset there. She takes some type of pill to calm down. And then the doctor comes over. God knows what happened in the 2.5 hour therapy session that they had in her bedroom. He instructs her to take more Nimbutal after he leaves to go to sleep. At this point, she's taking her pills with champagne. That's noted by many of her friends. And then allegedly, again, Robert Kennedy comes back. And in my opinion, I think I'm going to add one other person in there. It would be Robert Kennedy or whoever his goons were with him as well, because it says that he showed up with 2 people. There was a scuffle. There was an issue. I think they attempted to subdue her. That's why I could say accidental manslaughter. I don't think they went there with the intent to kill her, but I think that they went there with the fact of, we got to get our hands on whatever this woman has, because it's noted by several people that she's recording conversations. She's writing stuff down. God knows we talked so much about the red diary that she allegedly had. But that was confirmed by Pat Newcomb in the 2018 interview that, yes, she did have a diary. She couldn't remember if it was red, but she did have a diary. I think they showed up. I think they ransacked her place. I think they subdued her before they did, so she wouldn't be, yet again, a problem. I think whenever they attempted to subdue her, she already had too many drugs in her system. Therefore, it counteracted. They went, oh, shit, we're screwed. Left. Paramedics get called. Paramedics come in with the doctor. Doctor administers a hot shot. Paramedics pump her heart, and that's what kills her.
That's my theory as well. However, let me throw one more little wrench into it here.
Okay.
I absolutely think that the doctor or doctors, they are my villains in this, because she has 3 bruises on her. 3 bruises that are noted on the autopsy.
Mm-hmm.
Now, they said no needle marks, but you and I both know that if you get a shot in a piece of muscle, it is going to bruise. And she has 3 needle marks, 3 bruises in her hip, in the top part of her tail, and then a little bit higher up, which could have been a miss. I think that more than likely that she was given something in one of those sessions to calm her down. I think that's why you see no pills in her system.
I'm gonna play devil's advocate real quick, just because I don't want us to get
Okay,
too far away.
I was good. All right.
No. I just want to play devil's advocate real quick before we get too far away from this. I will throw out that it is alleged and said that she was given a shot 36 hours prior to, well, what would equate to 36 hours prior to her death because of the bouts of colitis and diarrhea that she was facing at the time of her death.
That
Go
could
ahead.
account for
I'm
one
just
of
gonna
them.
throw that out there. Yeah,
That
no,
could
I
account
agree.
one of them, but there were 3.
Oh, I agree.
So I think that perhaps that in that first visit from her doctor that she might have been given a shot just to, oh, we got to calm the little lady down. She's way too worked up. Potentially a second shot. Then, and that would account for no actual pills being in her system. And I do agree that the person who administered the hot shot, that was the doctor, I think that was, I think what he had given her before was supposed to do the trick. I think Robert Kennedy showed up to see if the job had been done. And upon seeing that he, oh crap, I got to get out of here, he takes off. Then they call, oh my God, something's happened to Maryland. Maryland, they get there. Oh, EMS and paramedics say she's still breathing. Oh, but her heart has stopped. We think her heart has stopped. Boom, hot shot in. The paramedics pump whatever this is into her system. And in doing that, they become unwitting
Murderers.
And yeah, unwitting,
I mean, if we're going to put it out there bluntly,
yeah,
I mean,
they don't mean to be in doing their job and what they were supposed to do. I think that they are actually the ones that finished her off. And now why they would allow this doctor to administer the adrenaline to her heart instead of them, that doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah, but again, like, you got to remember, and I know that I've
and he
mentioned
just
this.
happens to have adrenaline or a hot shot with him. See, that does not make sense to me either.
Okay, I'll play 2 points to what you were saying here.
Okay.
Because doctor is more than likely the one administering the shot, because we're talking about 1962. An ambulance is not going to be the same mobile medical unit that we have
We've
in
discussed
today's
that.
times.
Right. We've discussed
So
that. What would
more
be
than
stocked
likely,
and not stocked, right?
Yeah, more than likely, as we've said before, all that they're going to have on board is like smelling salts or something like that at this time. Because we're talking about a time where you had to call an ambulance company to get an ambulance to the house. You couldn't dial 911. To be able to get an ambulance. At least I don't think you could yet. I don't remember whenever 911 came out. But anyways.
911 was like, oh, geez. Don't get me lying. I'm thinking it's the 80s.
I was going to say, I think it's like 20 years later past this. So I think that's why he's administering the shot. And I think that the reason why
it's awfully convenient that he has it. Do you see?
But you gotta remember who his patient is at this time. His patient's Marilyn Monroe. He's been prescribing her God knows what. And there's eyewitnesses at the Cal Neva Lodge on the last weekend that basically say she pulls out a handful of syringes out of her bag and sets them on the table.
But those syringes are downers. He prescribes her things to calm her down, not to rev her up.
Not necessarily, because she was on both uppers and downers. She was on uppers to bring her up and downers to take her down to sleep. I mean, obviously, they're uppers and downers. I just
don't think he conveniently carries around a syringe full of adrenaline. I'm not buying it. I am not buying it. You're not going to convince me otherwise. He did not conveniently carry a syringe of adrenaline just in case her heart stopped.
But he gets a call. He gets a call prior to getting there. He lived like a mile down the street from her. He wasn't that far away.
I don't care. He didn't. Where did he get it? Did he pull it out of his asshole? He didn't have time to truck to the hospital to get it. He didn't have it in his house. I do not believe that he just conveniently carried adrenaline.
There it is right there in the comments. Holly, thank you again. He has to always be prepared to save her life, knowing he is doping her.
He
There's your
doesn't
answer right
want to
there.
save her life.
How do you know that? Or not that, but I'm talking like in the past. She's talking about in the past too. Holly's talking about in the past. He's doping her so much then, but maybe this is the one time that they're like, okay, yeah, we got to do it. We're going to use the doctor to do it. We're not the only ones that think it's Dr. Ralph Greenson.
But
He took a
at the
shitstorm
end
from
of
this.
but at the end of the day, what I'm saying is he didn't have adrenaline, and that's the bottom line. He didn't have. At the end of the day, that was not adrenaline that he put in her. There's no way it could have been.
Now,
So,
let's say
so to
we
say
are.
that it was a syringe of adrenaline, it cannot possibly be, because number one, I don't believe he carried it, and number two, she dies with it being pumped through her system when she was alive. She was alive. They began doing CPR on her. He says, let me give her a hot shot. And then she's dead. It was not adrenaline in that syringe. He did not have adrenaline with him. That is not what he put in her. Changed my mind.
I mean, I don't think either way, whether it was or was not, that there is a verifiable way to say that there wasn't. Number one, we're also going off of alleged.
There was no adrenaline on the toxicology report. You would think that there would be a massive dose of it in her.
But we're also going off of alleged tapes that were said to have taken place during this time. So if we're playing true devil's advocate, if they're alleged tapes, then this may not have ever even happened to begin with, you know? So, but
we do know that there was an ambulance that went there. We do know that they were sent away and told to come back.
We have multiple people stating that there was an ambulance and or a police car. I'm going to say and or because there's only like one or two statements that say and or and a police car. So and or a police car, but there was noted by multiple people that an ambulance was present at Marilyn's house. Multiple people say that she was loaded into an ambulance prior to midnight, that she was supposedly taken to the hospital, died en route, and they were instructed to turn around and come back. And there's one interview that I found between Anthony Summers and I believe that it was an FBI informant that said Dr. Greenson was in the ambulance with them and that he heard that from a senior FBI agent himself. And that would explain why the ambulance was instructed to turn around and go back to Marilyn's house because she had died in the ambulance, which fits into the story of what we are saying, that she was administered something in her house. And that would also, excuse me, that also helps to explain the dual lividity, because if she dies in the ambulance and they have to take her back, all of a sudden they have Marilyn Monroe dead in an ambulance. What's the story? How did this happen? She's got to lay there for a minute, and while they figure it out, boom, all of a sudden 20 minutes go by, 30 minutes go by, because livor mortis takes place in the first 2 to 4 hours, you know? And so 20, 30 minutes go by, the blood's going to pool on her back. Then they say, hey, we're going to put her into bed. We're going to lay her face down. She's naked already, because supposedly that's how they found her. We're going to put her in her bed and we're going to clean up this crime scene. That ties into all the facts of going back to when Pat Newcomb was interviewed in 2018, when she said, I was there, and she was adamant about being there at 1:30 in the morning. Because as all of it times out, in episode 4, when we timed all this out and we went through it, you remember we had the ambulance back at her house. They come up with the story. They place her in a room. They clean up the scene. They make it look like she took her own life. And then Pat Newcomb says she saw her friend's body. Well, yeah, come on, Miss Publicist. Come on in. Please tell me, does this look like a room that somebody had taken their own life in? So, of course, she would have seen the body then.
Mm-hmm. They needed a witness. But again, I go back to the whole thing that there's no way that it is a suicide, because truly a suicide and she dies on her way to the hospital. Why do you need to cover that up? That's how it happened.
Look at all the celebrity.
So
we were actually speaking on this the other night on the phone, is that the fact that we have seen things be covered up as, what am I trying? What were we talking about? It was one way that we talked about it, that we've never seen
we've
something covered up with somebody taking their own life versus
they don't cover up anything. Yeah, suicides aren't covered up with murders, but murders are covered up with suicides.
Yeah.
So Go figure. Suicide seems to be a very, and my apologies if anybody that's been affected by this, they seem to be easy answers to difficult questions when dealing with someone who is extremely public, because they rely on the fact that the world doesn't really know who these people are.
Mm-hmm.
And they use that and they utilize it and they bastardize someone whose life really has been affected by a suicide. They bastardize it. I mean, it's awful that they're like, oh,
Mm-hmm.
let's just say this. It's easier because they have more to lose by telling the truth. And plus two people, plus two is as awful as this sounds as well. That tends to garner some sympathy and empathy. Oh my goodness, the poor dear. Did you hear what happened? That's awful. And suddenly the people who show up at the funeral, who are the actual villains, now look as grieving mourners, not as potential suspects.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very, very dirty, dirty way to cover things up.
Well, and the thing was that I think it was the easiest solution for them, because you remember me saying that whenever she was about to give her tell all, it's not just the Kennedy brothers that she would have been bringing down. She would have been bringing down the office of the president, the attorney general, the office of the attorney general, part of the medical establishment,
the head of
part
the
of the
FBI.
mafia. J. Edgar Hoover would have had issues. She would have been bringing down this whole just incestuous circle of power players that struggled for power with her, that it wasn't just JFK. So if we mark it as suicide and write probable, therefore if it comes out later on 60 70 freaking years later that it wasn't, and in fact was a murder, we're not wrong because we wrote down probable, but we don't
didn't
have
say,
to.
we said if.
But we
said
don't.
If.
But
Yeah.
my whole part is the bigger part of that is if we check this, we don't have to check the undetermined box, which means we don't have to pry into the lives of JFK and RFK and Sam Giancana and Frank
And
Sinatra
Hoover.
and J. Edgar Hoover and all of these other people. That was the easiest solution.
That's
Take
right.
away our phone records, take away the specimens that from our autopsy, because the specimens are going to show exactly how the drug was administered and how her body digested the drug, which would have said if it was a shot, if it was by pills, if it was by an enema, which has been claimed as well. Yet they disappear. So we have no idea how her body is digesting this or how it even got into her system. You take specimens, phone records, and all this other shit away, and you check suicide, write probable next to it. Wipe our hands, problem solved. We don't have to question any of it anymore.
So if, and again, I am, you know how me, I get hung up on a detail. I'm still hung up about those 3 bruises. Those 3 bruises. And the fact that the coroner said that there were no needle marks on her. We know there had to have been one on her chest. We know that she had what appears to be in places that shots are administered, right in your hiney, right in your hip. For females, that hip is a very common place to get an injection, you know, in the fatty part of your butt. That's if you want something that's going to last. That, and then there's the one that's higher. Again, you did say that she had had one prior. However, I have had a shot and that thing start to bruise within minutes. I think that she was initially calmed down with a shot. And so if we go that route, that the first 2 didn't take. Okay. What is the motivation for the doctor? Who is pulling those strings? Because the doctor, he's making money off Marilyn. So it can't just be his idea. Who's your puppeteer? Who's your puppeteer? Who is the person pulling the strings? If we're going to lay the blame at the feet of the doctor, that he is actually the one that delivers the blow in whatever form or fashion. Who is pulling the strings? Who's the puppeteer?
I don't think that, see, that's where you and I think differently. I don't think that he went in with the mentality of, I'm killing her. I'm taking her out. I'm calling it done.
I disagree.
Because with me, it stops at basically that's where I have the issue of, was it an actual legitimate murder or was it an accidental manslaughter or a negligent death? Because I do believe that, this is my belief. I believe RFK, Robert Kennedy, showed up twice. Once around 4:30, as we discussed, They had a big old dispute and all that shit. And then later on that night, around the 10 o'clock time frame, when Norman Jeffries says that they showed up, as well as other people say they see her walking down the street, I think he shows up, and that's when he attempts to subdue her, to ransack her house, to find the tapes that she's been recording, to find the red diary that she's been writing everything down in. I don't believe that they went in there with the mentality of, we're going to kill her. But whenever they subdue her, she starts to realize that something isn't right. Marilyn's smart when it comes to medication, drugs, all this stuff. She's been taking them most of her adult life. And I think that when she realized that something was the issue, I think that's whenever she made the final phone call to Peter Lawford at 10:30-ish, that is corroborated by his dinner guest that he called them afterwards. Was like, Marilyn just called me. She lapsed into unconsciousness, which corroborates with Natalie Jacobs saying that they got the call while at the Mancini concert. And I think when the doctor showed up, I don't think he went in there with the intent to kill her. I think he went in there to revive her, as well as the paramedics. And I think that they both, based on the alcohol, the drugs, and whatever RFK administered her, mixed with whatever the doctor and paramedics did, pumped her heart and killed her. I don't think that there was ever a true intention that Marilyn has to die. I think the intention was, we've got to get our hands on whatever it is she has. And we'll go to any lengths. Yes, I can see where that includes murder, but we will go to, when I say that, is we will go to any lengths up to and including subduing her to be able to look through her house and get what we need and get out of there. That's just my opinion.
Going to disagree with you, because far greater men have done far more for less reasons. Marilyn was a problem. The United States government and most governments have places to put you if you are a problem, have things they can do to you if you are a problem. Hoover ran the FBI pretty much with an iron fist, and pretty much unsupervised. It was Hoover's FBI. That was the big thing, Hoover's FBI. And what she had could also do damage to J. Edgar Hoover. Now, if we want to let Robert Kennedy off scot-free, I'm willing to almost give you that. But the thing is, he shows up and they have a scuffle because she is what? A problem. She's a problem for him. She has crap about Hoover. She is a problem for Hoover. And of all things, she can name mob connections. So she is a problem for the mob. The mob operates in secrecy. And you know, mobsters don't give a damn. They'll drop somebody in a heartbeat. That is the way that business is done. And the Code of Omerta means you shut your mouth. And she's threatening to tell things that could be very, very bad for business. Business for FBI, business for the Kennedys, and business for the mob. I think that you can spin the wheel and pick any one and put enough money in that doctor's hands, especially after the scuffle with RFK. Take care of the Marilyn problem. You can hear it being said. You can see it playing out, and you can see the wheels turning on how do we do it so that no one looks at us. It's a suicide. How do we make that happen? I think that there is a puppeteer. And if I'm going to guess that actually the primary puppeteer was more than likely Hoover at the suggestion of Kennedy. Because you have to remember, Daddy Kennedy, and very good with the mobsters, that's not a secret. If I'm telling you something you don't know, you need to go back and look at your history books. Daddy Kennedy was in great with the mob. So you kind of have, it's a problem for the mob, it's a problem for the Kennedys, and it's a problem for the FBI. So I think if we want to pin it, I think Hoover got word to someone, because remember, Kennedy showed up with a couple of goons. Don't really know who those goons were. But he would have had some kind of protection. He was a, you know.
He's the Attorney General of the United States.
That's right. That's right. So I think that after the scuffle, word got sent. Tell Greenson it's a go. Take care of the Maryland problem. We're done playing with this.
I think it was ordered,
and I'm going to lay it at Hoover's feet. That's where I'm going to lay it, is at Hoover's feet. I think he is the puppeteer with a push onto the stage by the Kennedys.
See,
Talk
for
to me
me,
about
it's
it.
just well, I mean, I can see where you're coming from on that, but I mean, you and I have slightly discussed some of the mob angle on that, and I don't, in my mind, I just can't see. Let me answer a question in the comments real quick. Tammy
Okay.
asked it didn't the mob have art on Hoover? Tammy, the mob had dirt
Dirt on
on Hoover.
everybody.
Yeah, pretty much. But they did have dirt on Hoover because Hoover was found in some very
Hoover,
not
they had
so.
pictures of Hoover dressed in women's clothing.
Yes. Yes.
And Hoover basically was having to, whenever Robert Kennedy was in power, Tammy, as the attorney general, the mob had been left alone until he came into power. And then he starts, shaking J. Edgar's, chain, telling the FBI, you got to get on these. Robert Kennedy wanted to make a name for himself by taking down the mob.
Yep.
Whereas Daddy Kennedy and Hoover had enjoyed this nice little symbiotic relationship where, hey, we're going to make money over here. The Kennedys are going to make money over here. And we're going to put people in power by using the mob. And Hoover, guess what? If you'll just look the other way, all will be well. And you're going to be the head of the FBI. And we're going to let you do what you want to do, how you do it. And
But
that all
Hoover,
got shaken up whenever Robert Kennedy decided he was going after the mob.
yeah, but Hoover also was allegedly business partners with Frank Costello in Florida in a racetrack in Florida. So yeah, let's just go ahead and throw all his dirt out there.
Yeah.
No, I can see where the mob connection comes in. My whole thing, this is the part that I'm going to not argue, but dispute with you on that. I don't think that the mob had a play in it. Yes, I do think that there were things that she was threatening to say that could have reflected bad on the mob.
I'm not saying the mob is puppeteer. I'm saying that Hoover is the puppeteer, the actual giver of the command at the insistence of the Kennedys. The mob's not unhappy about it. But I'm saying if you want to just throw in devil's advocate and throw in every potential person that could have carried it out, you got the three most powerful entities in the United States. You have the mob, you have basically the presidential and, attorney general's office, and you have the FBI.
Yeah.
Pick one, spin the wheel. They're all capable and powerful enough and well-funded enough to put the money in the correct hand to make this happen.
Yeah. I just don't think that the mob was the one putting the money in the hands, just because they had what they wanted. They were trying to get dirt on the Kennedys to build this file against them that for blackmail reasons. And they had, after the Cal Neva the Lost Weekend incident in Marilyn's life, they had a very distraught Marilyn on their hands who was ready to target the Kennedys. I think that she was going to do the tell-all about the Kennedy brothers. Would there have been things in there that could have reflected bad on people in the mob or in the mafia? Yeah, but I mean, they're part of the mafia and the mob. I mean, they probably would have been like, yeah, we've done worse.
But here's where she becomes dangerous. If she's willing to tell everything she knows about the president of the United States and the attorney general, do you not think? Because see, you know what she's doing right there? She's turning rat. And if she's willing to turn rat on the most powerful office in the United States, what happens if the mob pisses her off just right? She knows connections. She knows the spider web. She knows which one connects to which, and she knows which direction the spider crawls. Yeah, that is a problem. That is very much a problem.
I agree. I think at the time when she died, I'm not saying we can't see whatever the future would have held, for her and the mob's relationship. But I think at the time that she died, I don't believe that the mob had any involvement in it, because they had exactly what they wanted at that moment, was a very distraught Marilyn going after the Kennedy brothers. And I think that that's exactly what they were wanting to do too, is go after the Kennedy brothers. Now,
Robert Kennedy was pissing them off.
Oh, well, yeah. But after all this came out with the Kennedy brothers, had there been some other dispute between Marilyn and the mob down the road? Yeah, probably.
More than likely.
But I don't think in this one instance with what was happening, that they had association with it, just in my opinion. I just don't think that there was a puppeteer.
We need to get you into more conspiracy theories. There's always a puppet master.
Well, I think for me, no, and I understand, but I think looking at it a different angle, I think the reason why there is a conspiracy theory that surrounds Marilyn's death is because obviously there was an attempt at a cover up. Her phone records are missing, her specimens are missing, documents are missing, things aren't accounted for, and all that kind of
Her
stuff.
timeline of death is off,
In order
according
to
to
not
witnesses.
Yeah, and in order to not have a conspiracy surrounding a celebrity's death, I mean, just look at the Kurt Cobain episode that we did. Full transparency has to take place. If we don't have full transparency, then the public is left to fill in the blanks for themselves. When I see the conspiracy theory on Marilyn's death, I don't know if it's so much of the conspiracy of her death as it is the conspiracy to cover up her death. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Because of the people that she was involved in. I don't know if it's the conspiracy to kill her so much as it is, oh shit, she's dead. Now let's devise the plan and the conspiracy to cover that up.
If the death was truly an accident, no matter accident in whatever form it might have come in, the least egregious headline: Marilyn Monroe dies accidentally something. What an easy way out.
Mm-hmm.
What an easy and honest way out. If it was truly an accident, you get them in there, you bring, and this is also something that's very interesting. Back then, celebrity died, these were not crime scenes that were cordoned off. When Paul Castellano was murdered, there were reporters walking through his blood in the streets. So crime scenes were not necessarily concealed, even if they were in homes. If the cops were there, the reporters were walking in and out, taking pictures and taking notes.
Disagree with you. I'm going to completely disagree with you because I have studied every police report that there is that's out there that has to do with Marilyn's day that she died. That house was absolutely cordoned off. That was and there is actually photographs. There's photographs of crime scene tape across the door. So her house was cordoned off, which is what my issue is and why there's the conspiracy to cover it up because of what Pat Newcomb says later on in the years that come when she's changing her timeline of, I was woken up at 4:00. I was woken up at this time. I was there at 1:00. I saw the body. She supposedly didn't show up until after the police were there. How would she have seen the body if the entire house was cordoned off? There's multiple reports that say the house is cordoned off.
Well, there's a difference in a perimeter being cordoned off and the house saying you can't come in the house. Mm-hmm. We see whenever things happen and reporters are outside. They're as close as they can go and they're taking pictures through windows and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
It does not sound like there was enough police manpower to put a barrier all the way around that house. And back then, the newspaper guys, they would do anything, go in anywhere. They would walk across and usually destroy evidence in the process of getting a story.
Mm-hmm.
So just putting crime scene tape across the door does not count as cordoning it off. I'm talking the blocked off, everything, nobody in or out.
Well, you got to remember, she had a wall around her house with two big, huge wooden wrought iron gates, wood and not wooden, but wood and wrought iron gates in the front that they kept closed for most part of it. Now, in earlier reports, when people are saying that they are showing up to the scene, there are people that are on the lawn. There are people that are around the house, but that is quickly pushed back outside of the gates of her house.
Okay.
The part that I'm saying that gets me is that it's like when Jack Clemens, the original police officer that showed up on the scene, he states and he says in his testimony, the only people that I spoke to was the two doctors and Eunice Murray. No, I did not check the rest of the house, but he also states that there were quite a few cars whenever he pulled up. And then in between him leaving the scene after the second set of officers arrive at about 4:45, all of a sudden, Pat Newcomb, Norman Jeffries, and Mickey Rudin, which is Marilyn's lawyer, are being interviewed inside the house. So in other words, they had to be inside the house. Number one, that kind of throws a red flag to me. Number two is, like I said, Pat Newcomb saying that she has seen a body. She was there at 4:00 or 4:30 is what it was. Mm-hmm. The only way she would have been able to see the body is if she was there prior to the police showing up. If she had gotten there after the police showed up, the house would have been cordoned off. She would not have been allowed in. And also she would not have been interviewed that night because she wasn't there. They probably would have asked her a couple of things. So like, what was Marilyn's day like? What did she do? But she wouldn't have been interviewed as intimately as the housekeeper or the doctors would have had she not already been in the house when Marilyn died. So there's this whole thing that's where it leads.
Yeah, we have a timeline issue, a huge timeline issue, because most people don't let people into a crime scene if it is truly a crime scene.
And that's what leads me back to kind of believe the fact of it's not the conspiracy so much for her
It's the
death.
cover-up.
It's the cover-up. It's the conspiracy of her cover-up of her
Because if
death.
there's truly no need for a cover-up, then why are we covering anything?
Exactly. Why are we taking things away and taking things out of the case file if there truly is nothing to cover?
Now, you can have a couple of reasons for that. Let's play along here.
Okay.
Because of the fact that if Robert Kennedy's name is in there, well, he's the attorney general.
Right.
Okay, we're going to take his name out. Powerful person, has no business being there. He's married, could damage. Okay. That is really the only reason. If you have somebody there who shouldn't be, that's why things are redacted. Or if there's some great state secret that's revealed. Okay, there was nothing in that autopsy or in that room that would have alluded to compromising national security. That's the other reason why things are redacted. So it would have had to have been to remove names of people who would have preferred to be a ghost and not be there. So just the redactions alone, that is a red flag. That is a huge red flag.
The two things that took place that night that actually weren't redacted that has been reported on multiple sources is the fact that there is a police officer who pulls over a car shortly before midnight containing Peter Lawford driving, Dr. Ralph Greenson, and Robert Kennedy. And
a speeding car.
A speeding car. It's pulled over doing like 55 and a 45. And then 2 hours later, you have neighbors who are being pissed off because they're reporting that a helicopter is landing on the shoreline where Peter Lawford's house is. And after the fact, you have a helicopter log from a pilot that says that he made a 2 a.m. flight picking up Robert Kennedy to take him to an airport to catch a connecting flight out of California. And that right there is why I think there's the conspiracy to cover up, and what leads me back to think that Robert Kennedy, because there's too many people on that block and in that house that were associated, including Eunice Murray, who comes out like 23 years later and says, yeah, Robert Kennedy was there, the housekeeper, this spy that was placed in her life, basically, by Dr. Greenson.
So and Dr. Greenson was put there by the mob.
I don't know if he was necessarily put there by the mob.
Come on.
No,
she was put there by the mob. Whenever the mob, a dude in the mob recommends the doctor to you, there's a reason.
See, I don't know, because she also had her New York and psychoanalyst who also kind of gave a small recommendation on Ralph Greenson's part. So I don't know if it was the mob that placed him in her life, but I do think that 100% Eunice Murray was placed in Marilyn's life as her housekeeper to spy, because all of her friends said she skulked around corners, she paid too close attention, she always asked who they were, what their business was, and paid attention to how long they were there.
Coming in and out of Marilyn Monroe's house, because knowledge is power. Absolutely.
I don't think it was the mob. I think you're giving the mob way too much seeping into her life. I think that they were documenting, following, and all of that kind of stuff with her to kind of keep tabs on her. But I think infiltrating further than that, in my opinion, is kind of stretching it.
It depends on how valuable she was to the information that they needed to get what they want from the most powerful office in the United States. That's how you say that Eunice Murray was put there. You want to get out from underneath Daddy Joe's finger? You want to get RFK to leave you alone? Catch him at Marilyn Monroe's house when she's dead.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's the conspiracy of the cover-up, because he was placed at her house twice by multiple sources the night that she passed away. And that's why there's this conspiracy to cover up, which lends back to the fact that I don't think anybody went there intentionally to kill her. I think that when she ended up dying, they basically went, fuck, now we got to get rid of shit. And that's, to me, when the conspiracy started. When Marilyn died, that's when the conspiracy started. When they planned out the fact of how they were going to find her, quote unquote, and then all of a sudden phone records go missing, and these stories start coming up, and timelines start changing. Autopsy pages go missing, specimens go missing. They're making sure that these moments after Marilyn dies disappear from the timeline. I don't think the intention was to kill her. And that's why there's such a conspiracy
I think
theory
you're
around
giving
Marilyn.
people credit for moving way too fast.
Moving way too fast, as in
Fast. You mean they came up with this grand plan in less than, say she dies at 10, now they've got people over there by 3 a.m.? You're giving them a lot of credit for having nothing planned. I don't know
they're
about you.
doctors. How many times do you think doctors have seen people die? Walked in on
No,
situations. They're
I'm
doctors.
telling you, stories are straight. People are being interviewed. Everybody knows where everybody
Stories
is.
are not straight. Stories are not
on
straight.
On the night of, and the stories that are public, it's a suicide. Everybody would agree it's a suicide. We have it down. We have down what we're going to say. And yeah, I think you're giving them credit for moving too quickly.
See, and I think that you're not giving them enough credit for moving too quickly.
It doesn't work both ways. Either it's planned and they know what they're going to do because they're able to move quickly, they have it in place, or it's not planned and it's just like, holy crap. And I'm telling you, a holy crap moment, the first thing to do in a holy crap moment is, okay, most people go, okay, oh shit, I got to get the cops here. I don't know what to do with this. Da, 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 da. Okay, I need an ambulance. I need an ambulance first. I need the cops. The next call is usually not your publicist. Just me. Maybe it was for Marilyn.
I was going to say for Marilyn Monroe, it could have been, because she is such an international celebrity. But here's my thing. Number one, they're doctors. You got to give them credit for that. They're a psychiatrist who thinks mentally, and they're a physician who is treating her. So they're going to know every single medication that she's on. They're going to know when she takes it, how she takes it, where she takes it, and with what she takes it with.
Wait. What are you basing it on that they know what and how she takes it? She would pop pills randomly and self-medicate. How can you say that they know where and how she takes it? No, they don't. They know what they give her.
Yeah.
They don't know how often she takes it.
You don't think that they don't have an inkling? Her psychiatrist doesn't have an inkling of how often she takes her pills?
Unless he's in the room with her every minute. No. Okay, wait. Let me ask you a question. Let's be real here. Let me ask you a question.
Okay. All right.
You ever had something done, like say oral surgery or something, where you had to be given pain medication and it says every 4 to 6 hours? Right initially, if it really hurts, okay, 3.5 hours because I don't want to wake up, wear off, you taking another one. Or maybe you're supposed to wait for 6. It gets that 5 hour and 15-minute mark. You're going, I can't stand it. I'm going to take another one. Now, technically, you've overlapped your medication. Technically, you're taking it in the window, but not really. You don't think that she cheated? I mean, we cheat.
Oh God, she was chewing pills like they were candy.
So how can you say that they knew how she took her medicine?
No. Because, okay, let me back up. Because I think when I started rattling all those stuff off, you clung on to 2 words that I was just throwing out a list. Okay. Number 1, I'm not saying that they know exactly how, when, where, and all that stuff. What I'm saying is
they know how she's supposed to take it.
Basically, what I'm saying boils down to, they've got a list of her medication. Just point blank, leave it at that. They got a list of her medication. They know what she's on. They know what the side effects are. They know by now that she takes it with champagne because of her therapy treatments at Dr. Greenson's house, where she is drinking champagne while doing therapy. Don't think she didn't pop a pill during one of those now and again? Sure she did. So
I probably would have too.
They know that there's all this stuff. You have 2 doctors in a room who have a celebrity patient that has died. And they got to come up with something. You don't think that the first thing with being her psychiatrist, the first thing is she took her own life? If he truly knows her deep, dark secrets of the way that she's feeling and all this medication she's on and all that stuff, I think that story could have been spun super fast. I mean, 30 minutes tops to come up with a story. She overdosed. Oh, look, there's all the pill bottles on the nightstand. To me, it's a super easy story for two
Okay,
doctors to
I'm
come
not
up
saying
with.
that that's not an easy story. I'm saying the things that disappear, that had to go into place relatively quickly.
Yeah.
Yes, the saying suicide, that is super quick, super easy answer to deal with the Maryland problem.
Mhm.
Absolutely, it is. But the fact that within 4 hours of her being discovered, that her phone records are gone. That I mean, that that wasn't easy. That requires phone calls to people who can A, get access to, to phone records, B,
Mhm.
have the ability to get them, and C, have the ability to make them disappear. That is very fast moving for a process that is not quick, especially in the 60s.
But you don't think that if Dr. Greenson was in fact in the ambulance with Marilyn Monroe, turned around, went back to her house, realized that she was dead, and calls Peter Lawford. Peter Lawford gets him. We timed this out in 2 episodes
I
ago.
want to talk about that asshole too here in a minute.
But here's my thing: you don't think that within the time that Greenson makes a phone call to Lawford, Lawford swings by and picks up Greenson at Marilyn's house. They go out to the Beverly Hills Hotel to grab Robert Kennedy, get pulled over on the way back to Peter Lawford's house. And by the time that he gets back to Peter Lawford's house, you're only looking at shortly after midnight. Helicopter doesn't take off until 2 a.m. In those 2 hours, Peter Lawford's got a phone call. Bobby Kennedy could have made any freaking phone call to any person that he would have want and set into motion. This is what happened. She's dead. Get rid of it. You've already set it into motion. You're talking midnight or 12:30 in the morning at this point. Her phone records don't disappear allegedly until another 4 or 5 hours. He's got an hour and a half
Right. I think
to
we,
make
we
as many
determined there was a
phone
four
calls.
hour window in which her phone records are gone.
Yeah, basically from probably about midnight up until about, I believe they said 5 o'clock. There's a 5 hour window. And you don't think Bobby Kennedy going back to Peter Lawford's house for 2 hours before the helicopter picks him up, that he's not making wild phone calls because he knows that she's dead?
And he knows that he was there and that he was seen.
Exactly. He was seen. Get rid of it. She's dead. Go get her phone records. She's dead. Keep on top of this. I mean, that call could have been placed to Chief Parker of LAPD. After that, it could have been placed to the coroner of the Los Angeles County Coroner's Office, Theodore Curfey. Hey, Marilyn's dead. She's gonna be coming in. We got to make sure that this is nice and clean. Specimens all of a
Here's
sudden go missing.
here's your problem, because we all know that two people can keep a secret if one of them's dead. Okay?
Yeah.
You are asking for a lot of people to make the conscious decision to not only lie,
Mm-hmm.
but then to perpetuate the lie over a set period of time. And well, the proof that it doesn't work is because you got Peter Lawford's wife talking about stuff.
Oh, she's blabbing like a motherfucker.
So this is again.
But that's the thing. I think what happened is they're trying to set in this conspiracy, but you don't think that the Attorney General of the United States in 1962, not 2022, but 1962, places a call to somebody and says, get rid of it. And that there isn't some sort of respect and authority down the chain from the lower people that they're going to get rid of it and shut the fuck up. But then you're exactly right. You have the issues because you do have those ones like the Eunice Murrays who keep changing their stories throughout the decades. The Patricia Kennedy Lawford who just starts, right out of her freaking mouth, that's because they went through a bitter
That
freaking divorce.
well, and you've got the went to the Mancini concert, the
Natalie
wife,
Jacobs.
Natalie Jacobs, who says that they had to leave
Mhm.
it early, and that's the problem. That's a set timeline right there of what time that thing had to be over, and they left before the end.
Mhm.
It's just, again, I think that there are a lot of moving parts in there, and I think that there are so many moving parts that it would have taken a little bit longer than what the time frame is to get all of those pieces in conjunction and moving together as a cohesive unit in order to pull all this off. I think a lot of it was seat of their pants. I think that as they were figuring out, they were doing it. And I mean, this
I think
it's
Bobby Kennedy
sloppy.
spent a
It's
lot.
sloppy.
I think Bobby Kennedy spent a lot of time on the telephone that weekend.
I don't doubt that, but it's sloppy. It's sloppy, and that's an
But
issue
how?
for
Hold
me.
on, no. But how can you say it's sloppy? Because here we are, 60 years later, wondering if Marilyn was murdered or she took her own life.
And if it would have been concise
Obviously,
and
it worked
clean,
though.
we wouldn't be questioning it, though. If it would have been irrefutable proof and
So
it was
what would have
clean,
been
we wouldn't be questioning it. The fact
what?
is, it's sloppy.
What would have been nice and clean to you in your mind? What would have been nice and clean for us
Um,
not to
all
question it 6 years later?
all toxicology reports available, no samples disappearing, no phone records disappearing, nothing redacted in autopsies. There would have been a definite cause of death listed as suicide, as unknown, as homicide, as something. There would have been a definite cause of death. And I think that would pretty much do it for me. If you had her samples available and everything had been tested and it would have come back and everything was as they said, suicide. Okay.
So you're saying if that isn't what happened and that's what they
yeah,
wanted to make it look like
that's right.
happened, then they should have fudged everything else to clean it up.
Absolutely, because
Okay.
that would have been clean.
Okay.
This
Okay.
is sloppy.
I get what you're saying now. It's like, how is this sloppy when we got phone records disappearing 5 hours later? I mean, my
No,
God,
it's
that's like
sloppy. You want me to buy that it's a suicide? You need to write a better story. And you need
I
to
understand what you're
bring
saying.
something to convince me.
I agree with
Because
that.
you threw paint on the wall to see if a picture came up and it didn't.
I
It's
100%
paint on the
agree with
wall.
that. I think it is a sloppy cover up, and that is why we still have the questions that we still have today. And I also think that that's the ones who believe that it was Marilyn that took her own life can't find the solid ground to argue a lot of the statements that have come out in the 60 years since, especially the most recent ones with like Pat Newcomb and stuff like that. They harp on these little tiny small details that they try to make the rug unravel, but they pull that one thread and it's like, oh, that one thread was just ready to come out. It didn't make the rug unravel at all. It actually kind of
But you
made
pull
it a little
enough
bit
threads and
cleaner.
you're gonna have holes in your rug.
Well, you are, but it's for me, you've got to harp on something that is a lot more than just phone numbers not being in a phone book. I mean, that is not enough proof. The absence of the evidence isn't the evidence of I can't finish that. Anyways, it doesn't make it the evidence that she ended up taking her own life, basically, is what I'm saying. Because there is no evidence of phone records in her books of people she called, you can't say that she didn't call them because she didn't have the phone. Just the absence of it doesn't make it evident that it took place. I've said that on multiple podcasts.
The absence of it doesn't mean that it did not happen because you can't prove a negative. You can't prove something didn't happen. You can only prove if something happened.
Exactly.
Because you can't prove something that didn't.
It's just like
it never was. There is no issue because it never happened.
Well, it's just like the other thing that people like to argue is the fact that there was no receipt for a washing machine, and Jack Clemens has stated that he caught Eunice Murray washing sheets while her employer lay dead in her room, and it didn't make sense. And I'm like, I'm sorry, you can't just because there's no washing machine receipt. There's a washing machine in the damn house. Just because there's no washing machine, and people are like, well, we weren't alive back then. We weren't there. We don't know if there was a washing machine. Now I'm going to say, are there key players in this? Because again, looking at both sides of it, are there key players and eyewitnesses in here, including police officers who may have shifted a couple of things throughout the years? Yes, Jack Clemens being one of them. But at the same time, just because one person is a shifty motherfucker doesn't mean you can throw out everything else that has taken place in the last 60 years. It's like people have a big issue with Anthony Summers in the new documentary that's on Netflix right now, The Unheard Tapes of Marilyn Monroe, which, by the way, is fascinating. Just because there were a couple of things that didn't line up in his research doesn't mean that you can negate the entire research. And that's what a lot of people like to do, who like to claim that, oh, Marilyn took her own life. Well, Anthony Summers says that he had this guy listening to tapes after the tapes were supposedly destroyed in a raid, that he heard Robert Kennedy coming to Marilyn's house. And this anonymous source he never claims. It can't happen because that was in 1967 when this anonymous source heard these tapes, but the tapes were destroyed in 65. Okay, that one instant doesn't negate the fact that Natalie Jacobs gave an interview that her husband was pulled away from a concert when the concert's in the newspaper for August the 4th of 1962, and it ended at 11 o'clock based on laws in Los Angeles. And she says that they were pulled at around 10:30. When we know, based on other corroborations, that a phone call took place from Marilyn's house to Peter Lawford's house at around the same time, because he then turned around and called his dinner guests, freaking out because Marilyn lapsed in unconsciousness. You can't negate everything that Anthony Summers and other people throughout the last 60 years have found out or that has come to light, because one instance in their research doesn't add up with the story that you're trying to tell.
Oh, I don't disagree with that. I don't disagree with that at all. So I mean, but however, whenever you have a collective of shifty assholes,
let me take my soapbox away real quick.
however, we don't have one shifty. We have several.
Oh, we have several.
And wait a minute, now listen. Wait a minute. I've been wanting to talk about this son of a bitch since Let's talk about Peter Lawford.
Okay.
I'm going to tell you right now, this guy has been a thorn in my ass since the first time you started talking about him, because it's funny. You never have anyone saying that Marilyn is saying this. You've never have any reports of Marilyn saying she's going to go talk about this. Marilyn saying the only time it's ever said that Marilyn says she's going to go to the press or Marilyn's talking about this, it comes out of Peter Lawford's mouth. Peter Lawford told the Kennedys. Peter Lawford told Robert.
I get what you're saying. Now, I will say the tell-all, multiple people said she was going to do it to the tell-all, but I get what you're saying. The sentiment is there because, yes, you are right. I would just maybe not use the tell-all because she told multiple people that. But other instances throughout the research,
No, I didn't say that. I didn't say the tell-all, that she's going to tell all. She's going to tell all. As she's going to tell everything she knows, not the book. I'm not talking about the tell-all book. I'm talking about, she says she's going to tell everything she knows. Let me rephrase. And the people that seem to be saying that she's saying it is this Peter Lawford asshole. And every time there's something going, oh, Marilyn called me and she's lapsed into a coma. Why the hell she call you? Again, he seems to be this little snake that keeps making his way through the garden. And every time you look up there, that son of a bitch is right there. Every time you hear a story, he's right there. He's in the middle of it. He's made the phone call. Oh, you know what? He decided they weren't going to stay at this house this weekend. They're going to be at this house because we got to protect reputations. Why is this little son of a bitch in everybody's business? Why? And I'm going to tell you right now, I don't think Marilyn ever publicly threatened to expose JFK. But somebody told JFK that she did, and it was that Peter Lawford bastard. And then you get to RFK's being told this. Well, who told him? Peter Lawford told him. I'm going to tell you right now, I think Peter Lawford was in love with Marilyn Monroe. I think that that she absolutely was like, no, thank you. I have bigger fish to fry, literally. And they're related to you. And I think that, there's nothing worse than being,
I think it's like an unrequited love.
Yes. Well, there's nothing more than being worse than being rejected, because she didn't have any problem banging married men. But I bet you anything she went, really? No.
Peter Lawford,
I know your wife. I know your wife.
There is,
and that was one of the few wives she knew.
There was a story that Peter Lawford and Marilyn in 1950 dated for a brief second, and it was because that Marilyn was not as into Peter Lawford as Peter Lawford was into Marilyn. So you could be onto something with this rejection thing. Now, I'm just gonna tell you on one aspect of it. I think that you are right on everything, that it was Peter in JFK and RFK's ears.
He was the little voice in everybody's ear.
I'm gonna say that on one thing, which was the last week of her life after the Lost Weekend. I keep wanting to say the Cal Neva Lodge, which is what it was, but everybody, Maryland fans, know it as the Lost Weekend. There were multiple people who said that she was going to go to the press, that she was going to.
Yeah, but who told them? Probably Peter Lawford.
No, they said that Marilyn themselves. They said Marilyn herself told them that she was going to go to the press. So that's the only instance.
And again, who are these them again? Who are these them again?
Robert Slatzer is one of them. Gloria Romanoff. Oh God, you're testing my knowledge here. Hold on.
So these people say Marilyn told me personally that she was going to go to the press. Not I had heard Marilyn was going to.
Correct.
Marilyn specifically said to me, "I'm going to the press."
Correct. Yes. that Marilyn said she was going to the press from her mouth to their ears.
But this is at the end. This isn't all the way through.
No, I know. That's what I'm saying. I'm agreeing with you up until the very last week of her
I
life when
wanted to argue
she,
with you some more.
because no, I know because my whole thing is that when she comes back from the Lost Weekend, and if you're watching and don't know what the Lost Weekend is, it's probably
Go
the most
watch the episode.
important weekend of Marilyn's life. Go watch episode 2, I believe, of the Monroe Files. I go into detail about the whole weekend. Marilyn is so irate with what happened during the weekend account, even the Lost Weekend on July 28th and 29th. Then when she comes back, she is done. This is a woman that is out for revenge. She is vengeful at this point.
She was drugged, abused, and photographed again without her consent.
She is more determined and motivated at this point than ever to break the silence on the relationship that she's having with both the Kennedy brothers. Actually, JFK cut her off back in.
Loyalty is long gone.
Yeah.
Loyalty is gone.
Oh yeah, it was done when that weekend was over. And I think what happened, because there's a couple of sources that state this, I think it boiled down to the fact that Marilyn made a threat that basically her ass wrote, or she wrote a check her ass couldn't cash. She made a threat, and I think that threat ended up costing her her life. Not to the extent of it's like, I'm going to go kill her because she just threatened me, but at the fact that, like, no, we're going to get our hands on whatever she has, and leading back to what I was saying earlier.
The wheels got put into motion to handle the Marilyn problem. And you know what, by the way, Peter Lawford was part of that little Lost Weekend too. That little snake was there too.
He was. Oh, he was. Yeah.
It's because just odd to me how in every story he pops up somewhere.
Well,
JFK doesn't pop up in everyone, or RFK doesn't, Giancana doesn't pop up in everyone, Sinatra doesn't pop up, but it seems like that little rat is running down every little hole and little pathway.
And I think that he is the one that absolutely 100%, like, the Sunday of the Lost Weekend sets things into motion, because he has the pilot, after he flies them back.
Yeah, it's his plane. Yeah, he's calling somebody or he's the one who brings them over there. Yeah, and he goes and picks everybody up. We're in my car. Let's go, guys. Ha ha ha.
Well, so he has, I mean, what it was actually Frank Sinatra plane and pilot. But anyways, he flies them back, then gets them in the car and takes them back to Peter Lawford's house. Well, right before he gets to Peter Lawford's house, Peter Lawford tells the driver, pull over. I need to make a phone call. And there's an 18-minute phone call placed on the White House phone records at like 5 o'clock in the morning or 6 o'clock in the morning, something like that, from Peter
Kennedy
Lawford
makes phone call
to JFK. No,
Peter Lawford makes the phone call to JFK.
And I think that was the moment that set all the wheels into motion, because Peter Lawford was probably like, look,
dude, I got your brother right here. What do you want me to do?
No, I think that what happened was that Marilyn had been dropped off at her house. She's been reeling from the Lost Weekend. We're talking July 29th now. Peter Lawford's making this phone call to JFK saying, dude, this is the weekend we just had. Marilyn's distraught. Marilyn's threatening all this shit. She's saying screw you and everything like that. She's ready to go tell all. What do we do? Because I think that what happened that weekend was that the Marilyn problem hit an impasse. And he had to tell JFK. So, yeah, I think that you're right in the fact that Peter Lawford's this little snake snitch, whatever.
Yeah, he's this little scurrying rat running room to room to room.
Whether he's doing it to be the center of attention or whether he's doing it to actually legitimately, let's say, play devil's advocate, look out for his brother-in-law's back, you know, either way, I think that he's the one that sets it all into motion, and then Marilyn follows it up with her own threat of, I'm going to expose you. And combine the two together, and I think the wheels were set into motion to get whatever she had on them away from her so that she could not have a tell-all with the press. And I think that's what ended into her accidental death.
All I know is I don't like him. Everything I read, I don't like about him. He's too much in somebody's business. You always have to worry about the person who wants to know more about you than you want to know about you. Well, what are you doing today? I don't know. I haven't even decided yet. Oh, well, whenever you know, tell me whenever you know. Why? Yeah. Why do you care? You know? Yeah. Anybody who's way too interested in you, shoot.
So those are some of the biggest things to me that brings me back to the conclusion I stated at the very beginning of this episode, is that Marilyn did not take her own life.
I agree with you on that.
Period. I think that you and I are in disagreement of the fact of how it was done and the outcome of how it was done.
We do
My
disagree on that.
my opinion is of the fact that it was along the lines of some type of accidental manslaughter or negligent death, because I think there was an attempt to subdue her, and then that ended up leading to her death later on, whenever
And I believe that the
drugs
order was
interacted.
given to handle the Marilyn Monroe problem, and therefore it was handled.
And so, in order for this to actually come out in the open, and I guess we're not really going to find out anything until 2039
30,
because
36 or 39?
39,
39?
39, because there are still the 4 boxes of Dr. Ralph Greenson's that are under lock and seal until 2039 at UCLA. They cannot be open, will not be opened until 2039. And I think that is the moment that I think a lot more will come to life about the death of Marilyn Monroe. But I'm going to say my final thought on this whole thing. And I'm really going to, I have been fighting emotions today. And I'm going to try not to get emotional when I say this, because I have spent 4 months inside Marilyn's brain, picking it apart, her life, picking it apart. And I think for the rest of history, for her to spend eternity with the word suicide marked on her death certificate is an injustice to who Marilyn Monroe was. I think at least, goddamn it, it's been 60 years. You don't have to open back up the fucking case. Nobody's alive anymore for that to take place. There's never going to be justice for Marilyn Monroe. But at least change the damn death certificate
At
so that
least
she
get it
doesn't
right.
have to be remembered as this damsel in distress with this horrible story that she just couldn't take anymore. Because that's probably, in my opinion, the furthest from the truth. That is the finality that needs to take place in this case. Find the things that went disappearing, because you don't think that they're still not there somewhere. You're dead wrong. Release the shit. Tell us you screwed up and changed the death certificate. And let this woman truly rest. Because saying that she took her own life, I just don't see the outcome of that taking place after walking down every road that I could possibly think of. And I'm talking
She was a fighter and a survivor and a
exactly.
scrapper, and had to do that her entire life. Doing hard things was not uncommon or unusual for her, and she wasn't the kind of woman who backed down, not from a
Mm-mm.
fight, not from an argument, not from a movie producer or movie directors. She was a scrapper. Again, the answer is too easy.
Mm-hmm.
It's cop out. It's cover up. And at the end of the day, she should be honored
Mm-hmm.
by the truth coming out. And it makes no difference whose feet are dirty. If you got to go through the mud, you got to go through the mud.
At this point, who cares whose feet are dirty?
Oh,
Because there's
lots of
nobody.
people
Because I'm sure that there is, but there's nobody left
that
that
is
was
directly
around at that
impacted.
time that is directly impacted that their feet can get dirty. So at this point, you know what? If you screwed up and you were part of a cover up and all that stuff, then fine, just come out and freaking tell us. Because to get
I'm going to tell
the
you,
conspiracy theory of Marilyn Monroe's death to quiet, that's the only way, is 100% full transparency.
even at the risk of destroying the illusion of Camelot,
Screw Camelot.
that's what they're protecting.
Screw Camelot.
Yeah, screw Camelot. Screw them. I agree, though. I think that someone that was that proud and determined and enigmatic and
Hmm.
charismatic and absolutely stunning, not just in the way she looked, but in the way she carried herself, even in the way that her mind worked, that she was crafty and she was thinking. She wasn't pushed around in a time when women were pretty much pushed around. She forged her
Mm-hmm.
own path and made her own way. And I think it's disrespectful for her to remain in a state of limbo as a probable suicide. There is
Yeah.
no probable. It's either suicide or it wasn't. And if it wasn't, I think we need to find out what actually happened.
I 100% agree. And I will say this, my new Marilyn, not new, but my Marilyn photo that I have that was done in the year that I was born is sitting in its new frame. I didn't have enough time to put it up behind me. I wanted to have it behind me for tonight's episode for the final live, but ran out of time. But she is sitting in front of me and she is staring at me as we do this episode. And it just seems like this has kind of come full circle for me right now. This isn't the end of my path with Marilyn. I have plans for everything that I've done. I can't tell you how much I've written, how much I've read, watched, listened to, the amount of pictures I've looked at, the Post-its that have been stuck all over my walls for 4 months. It's been a very interesting journey. And even as huge of a Maryland fan as I am, I was still able to uncover a couple of things that even today I didn't know. And to me, that's what was fascinating about this journey. And it had a lot to do with the timeline of the night that Marilyn died. So I'm going to shut up now because
Whenever you put a button
Marilyn
on it that works, just let it sit there and we'll say goodnight.
Yeah. So to Marilyn, always and forever in my heart, it is not the end of the road with you. But for tonight, we want to thank y'all for joining us of the Monroe Files. We hope that you've enjoyed this miniseries. If you haven't watched the first 5 episodes, please go back and rewatch them and then come back and see this one again. And I think a lot more would make sense for you. Shelly, a big, huge special thank you to you for joining me for all 6 episodes. I was going to do this alone, but you have made it 10 times better, 100 times better. And honestly, I couldn't have done it without you. So I appreciate you accompanying me on this. So
I've had fun. You know me, any option to disagree and argue, I'm all in.
I know it is. I know it is. So guys, we are everything vaguely paranormal from myself. I am Blake Smith. I'm going to get it right this week. And my wonderful special host throughout this whole thing, Miss Shelly Pruitt. Thank y'all so much. And as always, we will see you next Tuesday. Bye, y'all.